podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to Howie the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for another podcast on this match day as we head into the second leg of the playoffs. It's going to be a big one tonight. I know you've probably already caught up with the majority of the things on the feeds that we've done this week. We've really ramped it up in terms of coverage. So if you've missed out on any of the reaction to the game on Friday or the other bits and pieces we've done, the historical stuff or even the preview we did with Scott Wilson, make sure you catch up on that. But we are here today to chat about press conferences. Régis Bris met with the assorted North East media on Monday afternoon, and Frank Lampard did his press conference on Monday morning. So we're going to chat about what they had to say, maybe talk about a little bit of team news, what we would do in terms of team selections, score predictions, all that good stuff. Anyways, joining me, I've got Johnny Hawley. Hello, mate.
All right, Gav. Lovely to be back again. Still riding the high from Friday night. Not come down to earth just yet.
Any nerves or not?
They'll kick in tomorrow morning. It's always match day. As soon as a match day comes, I could have been as calm as you like for weeks. I will be bricking it. So
yeah, we'll just caveat this by saying we're not recording on the day that this is released. We are recording the day before. But anyways, there was a bunch of things that came out of that press conference with Régis Bris. First off, though, interesting, wasn't it, how every man and his dog was in attendance to ask questions for once. Normally it's Nick Barnes, a couple of others, and then it ends. And you had bloody Sky there, you had BBC, you had more people from the BBC there. It was interesting that everyone decided to turn up for the big day, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's one of them where if we do end up going all the way through and getting to the Premier League, Régis is going to have to get used to having slightly bloated press conferences next season, isn't he? So a little bit of a dress rehearsal for him. Yeah,
it was interesting to hear from some voices we haven't heard from in a while. I think Keith Downey from Sky Sports was in there asking questions and all the rest of it. But it kind of highlights the sense of the occasion, doesn't it? It's a big game. Everyone wants a piece of it. We've probably ramped up the expectation around the occasion, I think, because of what happened in the first leg. Obviously, because we've got that win and we've brought everyone back to the Stadium of Light, hoping to carry that through and get to the final. It's drawn some extra eyeballs to us, hasn't it?
Yeah, and like you say, it's like every aspect of the game kind of gets magnified, doesn't it? So there's physically more people in the press conferences. There's more eyes on all of the output from the club, the fan stuff. And there'll be, I'm sure there'll be loads of people. Obviously, we're expecting a really big crowd in the ground, and then there'll be loads of people watching at home, and everything just becomes bigger and more intense. So it's an interesting one, isn't it, as well, because it'll change how the players are going to react and everything. So the fact that, as you say, you kind of see that trickling in already in the days leading up to the game. I'm expecting it to be a bit of a pressure cooker atmosphere tomorrow, or tonight for everyone who's listening.
Yeah, don't confuse people. They'll be like, "Oh, but I thought I'll play it tonight." Oh well, people turn up at the Stadium of Light on bloody Wednesday night because of you.
You get invoices if that happens to you. Don't worry.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, it's going to be a massive occasion. So seeing it, like I say, starting in the days leading up, it's good, I think, because it'll give the players a bit of time to start acclimatising to it as well and start to let it sink in a little bit rather than on the day kind of just woof, everything hits you at once, or at least I hope so.
Yeah. Well, the press conference started off with some, as it always does, injury news. He was asked specifically about Romain Mundle and Agility, and as we expected, Romain Mundle's going to be fit for the game, which we'll probably get onto a bit later in terms of what we would do, but still good news, isn't it? I've got half a feeling that he might, if we'd really pushed him, we could have probably put him on the bench for the first leg. But they're protecting him, aren't they? Because they know that to get anything out of him, they've got to be careful, and he's going to be managed through these games. But still, given it was another hamstring injury, nice to have him back, isn't it?
It's great to see him back. It's always positive, isn't it, when you get one of your better players fit and ready to join the squad again for a match day. But it is nice, isn't it, like you say, to be in a position where we've not been totally desperate for him to come back. Because I think you're right, if they'd really needed to squeeze 20, 25 minutes out of him the other night, I think they probably could have done. But you don't want to be taking the risk because, like you say, 2 hamstring injuries now this season. the future of Sunderland AFC does not begin and end with these playoffs. We're going to need all of our best players next season, no matter what division we're in. So it's nice to see them taking a bit of care with them and not necessarily rushing them back. And in a similar vein, again, we'll get onto it later, but I'm sure for the second leg, if they were desperate to, I'm sure they could have found a way to force them in from the start. But I would expect them to be able to just play it a little bit more cautiously again and really step them up possibly with half an eye on the final. But obviously we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves just yet.
Yeah. For me though, with Mundle, he's such a good player that we've got to look after him. We can't. It's not like he's just like a left back or a right back or something. Not to do down those positions, but he's a creative player. He's an attacking player, and the only way you get anything out of those players is if you look after them. And it may well just be, praying that this is the case, but hopefully we don't need him and we can just keep him for the final, But in case we do need him, he's there, and that can only be a good thing. And his athleticism, his pace, his ability to cut inside and shoot, they're all things we haven't got really in any other area, not even on the right-hand side of the pitch. So, yeah, good news about Mundle. Slightly less positive news. Adjilisi is not going to be ready. Again, he wouldn't have started. He wouldn't have started the game. But interestingly, Régis said next week. So when he was asked about when Adjilisi will be available, hopefully we'll need him next week. But Adjilisi is somebody, again, who we've not seen much of this season. It's been disappointing for me. I think, when he had that little run in the team at the start, he was really good. Like, we all know he's a good footballer. He can play left back, he can play left centre-half. He actually had a couple of games, didn't he, with 09 at centre-half, where they really worked well together. So, yeah, a shame that we haven't got Adjilisi, but let's hope we don't need him, I would say.
Oh, yeah. For me, he's more of a what if from the start of the season rather than somebody that I've been too preoccupied with thinking about coming back. Because like you say, the back four's something that you tend to want settled anyway, so you don't like to be chopping and changing. And someone like Elise, unfortunately, with his injury record, he just isn't reliable enough to be able to, hang your hat on him for a full season. Certainly not at this stage. I think you were right to point out his partnership with 09 at the start of the season was they were excellent together, weren't they? And a little bit like what if Mundle had never picked up that first injury? What if Elise had never been injured? How much different does the rest of the season look? Because obviously he ended up being injured, and then you've got Mepham comes in and almost doesn't look back really. But yeah, good to see him back. I don't expect us to be, whatever the results are over the next game or possibly two, I wouldn't have thought there'd be too many Sunderland fans turning around and going, well, if Elise had just been fit from the start, it would have been a totally different story, as much as I think he's a great footballer. So yeah, nice to see him coming back, but yeah, I'm not holding my breath to see him actually on the pitch.
But bizarrely though, that when you think about it, other than those two and the frequently forgotten about Jan Paveda, who I think they've stopped asking about him. Other than that, though, we've got a fully fit squad for the final few games of the season. We've talked loads about approach and whether this was the right way to do it, and whether basically sacking off the last 5 games was the right thing to do. But even now, even if we don't get through, we've given ourselves a chance by having everybody fit. Everybody's going to be fit for, if we do get through, we're going to literally have a fully fit squad, bar one player who, again, we've kind of forgotten about, and Jayden Dans, who also has been forgotten about and don't think ever actually signed for us. But, again, I think it's just it can only be a good thing. These are going to be tough games. We could go at extra time at the Stadium of Light. Then if you do get through that, you could have, that Wembley pitch is massive. It's always drained. It's always red hot on that weekend in May, always red hot at Wembley. I just think back to that game in '98. It was like an absolute sweat box, and the players were wearing them bloody gold strips with a black line and that. How they got the penalties wearing them strips, I've got no idea. Probably all of them collectively sweat a swimming pool's worth of liquids out of their bodies. But you're going to need these people available and fit, and this is something which Régis Bris talked about, because he was asked about Chris Rigg and Chris Mepham in particular, because they'd both been dropped for the game. He was basically asked how did they feel, and he said they were disappointed, but at the same time they reacted positively as teammates to not being in the team, because they were so well connected with the squad and they share the same ambition as the rest of the team. And obviously he made a point to point out as well that, as I've just said, these games can go extra time. We're going to need our subs. We're going to need the full squad to be able to get the job done. And I thought that was an important thing to highlight, because if you saw the celebrations when Wilson Isidore scored, it was the subs who got involved first, wasn't it? It was Sam Ed, it was Harrison Jones and all the rest of them who were piling in. There does seem to be a real feeling, doesn't there? Like, even though there will be players who are pissed off and maybe gutted to not be playing in these games, that everybody's on the same page, right, for where we're going. Like, there's no... If anybody isn't, then they're not in the squad, clearly.
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly that. If anyone has been causing any sort of trouble behind the scenes, I'd imagine they'd have very swiftly had a talking to, and if things weren't changing, sayonara, you're not getting back in this squad for the rest of the season. And it's something as well, actually, because I did think it was interesting when he was talking about Mepham and Rigg there, and the way that he described them reacting, positively as teammates. I think that shows, obviously, like you say, real togetherness. I also think it's, maybe an underrated aspect of the way that we've gone about preparing for these games. We've clearly behind the scenes been really emphasising the importance of having everybody ready and available, and to have had minutes in the tank and, be ready to be able to contribute whatever form that might take. Because he's stressed, hasn't he, in loads of press conferences, we'll need, the whole squad, we'll need substitutes. I think he said something today as well about, we'll need 5 or maybe even 6 substitutes, in the second leg. If we end up going to extra time, then, that's a large number of players that you need to have ready and firing to come on. So I think the way that he's rested and rotated over the weeks has possibly gotten players a little bit more used to that idea of, no, there isn't a starting 11 and then people who are forgotten about. There's a lot of footballers who are all going to contribute, whether that's from the start, whether that's from, in the second half off the bench or what have you, all these different roles. I think that whole mentality shift from however long ago it was, call it 6 weeks for the sake of argument. I think the whole mentality shift that happened behind the scenes, I think has contributed to this feeling of togetherness and harmony in the team going these games, which, long may it continue, because you're only as good as the sum of your parts, aren't you? So if you've got people not pulling in the same direction, then you sharp get found out on the pitch. And, thankfully, we've managed not to do that in the first leg. So let's see if we can keep it up.
And there was a few times during the press conference too where he was talking about sort of the mindset of the group and how everybody's geared up for this. And I don't know about you, but I felt he was a little bit defiant on the point around flicking the switch. He talked about that quite a bit. He was asked about it, but he was also pretty defiant on it, as if to say, he didn't so much say it, but you got the impression like, I knew this was going to happen. I had full faith in my squad to be able to do it. And he highlighted, the fact that with the games at the end of the season, and because we had 4th place sewn up so early, that whilst we certainly tried to approach those games in the manner of which you would want to see the team approach them, it's just difficult to do that when you've got one eye on a bigger prize. And yeah, I just got I don't know if I want to ask you about that, because I don't know if you've got the same impression as me, that when he was talking about it, it was almost like wry smile on his face, a little bit of smugness, as if to say, I told you all this was going to happen, and that's kind of how I felt after the game too. I was the same, because I had full faith in what they were doing. So to then see the outcome which we got was fantastic. But at the same time as that, whilst there was a wry smile and a bit of defiance, just as many times he pointed out that the game's not done yet. He said half time numerous times. It's only half time. We're only halfway there. But at the same time, again, was talking about how we're not just going to go and sit back and try and protect the lead. I think he actually said that more. That's the biggest indicator he's given to how we're going to approach this game, because there probably is a lot of people who are expecting us to basically just sit back and try and defend the lead. And he said, we're not going to do that. This is a new game. We can't just sit back and hope it works. We've got to try and win the game. He actually used those words. So the mentality of this whole occasion, to me, is fascinating, because I don't know how I would approach it personally, given the way the season's gone, given the way we've managed to succeed in the majority of games. Like, sitting back and defending has suited us quite more often than not, and it did at Coventry. So it's, I suppose, like, how do you manage this group, and how do you manage the mentality of the team to ensure we get what we want at the end? I think it's just fascinating, and the way he talked about it actually filled me with more confidence than I went into the press conference with.
Yeah, and I think it showed, again, the size of the occasion in that press conference, you could see, because I thought Régis was in a very, very bullish mood. For as limited as his expressions tend to be, he's still not exactly coming in and ranting and raving, but for his particular style and standards through the press conferences this season, I did think this was a very much, a combative and, ready to fight version of Bris, answering those questions. Because you're right, when he was talking about being able to flick the switch, I think if he hadn't been so reserved in the other press conferences, he'd have been wheeling out, "I told you so. I told you so." It's just the fact that he never said it in as many words before now means he can't say that. But I totally agree. I think he was very much, almost, flicking the proverbial fingers up at anyone who's kind of doubted us and slagged us off, because you could tell that he believed it the whole way through. And there was definitely a sense of, I do know what I'm doing here, lads. I am a professional football coach. I'm not just making it up as I go along. And I think as well that the fact that he did come out and say that we're going to not just sit back and defend, again, that is uncharacteristic, isn't it? Normally you just kind of, we'll be focused, and we'll be looking at the patterns of play, and we'll be reacting to the opposition. You have to play against the team that you're playing against and all that sort of stuff. So for him to come out and make such, quite bold statements by his own standards, I think shows the size of the occasion, but also shows where the mentality is. And I think you can see that he's confident. And I think you could see from the players the other night that they were confident as well. There was no, at no point during the first leg did I get the sense that there were nerves around the decision making, other than maybe that moment from Anthony Patterson early on. But even then, he calmed down pretty quickly. And I think, it's all kind of coming from the top, really, isn't it? They've had consistent messaging. They've got somebody who believes in what they're doing and knows what they're doing, leading them and calling the shots. And I think you could see that exuding out of him today, like I say. So it was in Régis' favourite words, it was very interesting to see a bit more of that side of him. And I don't imagine it's something we should get too used to, but I think it shows that he has got a little bit of spikiness and a little bit of fight, which you do need to have for occasions like this. And other times, derby games and those sorts of occasions, you need to be able, ruffle a few feathers as and when it's needed. So yeah, it was good to see that from Big Reggie.
Well, I think as well, part of it will be he wants to keep Coventry guessing. He wants to keep Frank Lampard guessing, because we totally surprised them with the team selection the other day, and it obviously had a massive impact when you boil it down. Really, the way we won the game came through basically having pace and power up front and more than one option. It wasn't just coming through the middle. Isidore and Mayenda were splitting wide. They were giving better options to the likes of Enzo Lafayette to cut Coventry open. And there's no way they would have prepared for that, because they weren't expecting it. Nobody was. So part of us thinks as well, if he comes out and says we're not going to just sit back, that's his way of telling Coventry, we aren't going to be predictable in this game. And again, as you said, the word is interesting, but I think it's nice to see him. Because we talk about ramping things up and flicking the switch has been the most used phrase until the end over recent days. But it is, I guess, it's interesting to see him keep people on their toes, and he's been a little bit, no, I wouldn't say spiky, because he's not a spiky character, but I just think he's shown his real true worth as a coach. And he knows he got the upper hand in the last leg, and he wants to make sure that he doesn't give too much away, but he also that he doesn't give any perceived advantages to Coventry, right? So, it was one of those days where in his press conference he still doesn't give too much away, regardless. You never come away from one of these and think, "But yeah, I can't believe he said that," and I can't believe he said this. But for me, bullish, confident, I would say self-assured. In that, he almost gave the impression that he predicted all of this. He has that much confidence in his players that he can hang his hat on what's going to happen. And yeah, whilst he conceded that it's only half time, things can change, but he made sure everybody knows we're going to be ready for whatever happens. So I've got to say I was really impressed with the way he spoke, and there was a few questions in there where he just danced around it, like he was asked about the atmosphere in the fan base improving, and he basically just said we're going to need everybody with us, as they did the other day, and it's going to be even better now we're at the Stadium of Light with more fans behind us, which is true. But he just focused very much on the task at hand, and I'll be honest, listen to Frank Lampard's press conference, and he was very much the same. Calm, collected, perhaps not as energetic as Bris. Very often when you watch a Frank Lampard press conference, that's how you kind of feel about him anyways. I've watched him before at other clubs, and he reminds a bit of Scott Parker. He's quite dull, isn't he, really? You don't ever watch him and think, oh, fucking hell, that was exciting. But to be fair to Frank Lampard, he wasn't disrespectful. He was pretty complimentary of Sunderland for carrying out a game plan and it working. And at the same time, managed to talk up his own team and say we did everything we asked of them. Our game plan was good. He was asked where things went wrong, and he just basically boiled it down to goals, and said at the end of the day, we made a couple of mistakes. They punished us, and he acknowledged the fact that our strength is in counter-attack, and he said you don't want to give Sunderland too many opportunities to counter-attack, but at the same time we did, and we were made to pay for it. And I actually was a little bit surprised. I was expecting to listen to Frank Lampard and for him to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But I suppose at the same time, this is a bloke who's won everything, and he's played at the highest level, and I presume that his approach is to just make sure that his players don't get too bogged down in the negativity that could probably come from that game. I mean, he was asked about the mistake that the right back made, and he just basically brushed it off. And I think that's probably the right approach. If I was a Coventry fan, that's probably what I would want to hear as well.
Yeah, he has to, doesn't he? And I think it's doubly so because, look, it's the way that the second goal for us came about is almost as bad as it gets from a Coventry point of view, isn't it? Like, under basically no pressure, massive mistake, puts us ahead in the tie, late on, it's not great. So he can't come out and say anything negative about it because he'll just shatter the lad's confidence. I'm sure the lad, Van Eervak, he's going to know how badly he's messed up there. So there's no sense Lampard coming out and slaughtering him. But also, I think Lampard needs to focus on the positives, because now all of the pre-first leg build-up was focused around Sunderland are out of form, awful record against Coventry. Coventry tend to be much better at home than they are away from home. So
Sunderland not scoring goals.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, everything was all around our negatives and their positives, or not everything, but most coverage.
To be honest, I would say that the vast majority of it was. You turned on Sky before the game, and it was all about that's what it was.
Yeah, exactly. You might have had the odd lone voice now and then saying Sunderland are actually quite good, but barring that, it was very much focusing on them. But now, in one game, almost all of that is completely flipped on its head. The record against Coventry, that's gone because we've just beaten them. They're now the away side, and their away form's, been particularly poor compared to the home form. We've got something to defend. The list goes on in terms of ways that this is flipped around for us. And that question around, can Sunderland turn it on when it matters, as we've just spoken about, it's kind of been addressed. Like, the answer is yes. Doesn't mean that we're going to turn up and do it in the second leg automatically, but it shows that we can. And just to go back to Bris talking about in training, even they could see the players weren't maybe as motivated or intense, or whatever the word you might want to use is, because of the league position. Just on a personal note, like, I've thought that, and I've said that a few times over the last few weeks. Like, of course it's hard to get yourself up for stuff when you know in the back of your mind it doesn't really matter and something bigger's coming up. But now here we are at the something bigger, and we've shown that we've got it in the locker to be able to turn around and start putting performances in. So yeah, I think the pressure goes, look, we're still under pressure, obviously, because it's a big game, but there's been a massive shift, hasn't there, in the way that everybody's talking about and approaching this tie from first leg to now. So I'm not surprised at all to see Lampard talking his side up. And some of the stuff he says is kind of fair enough as well. You think about the way that the game kind of played out, in the first leg. By and large, Coventry did kind of make most of the running, and it was kind of just the goals where we, sucker punched might be a slightly harsh way of putting it, but basically we did, didn't we? We drew them out, sucked them in, let them come at us, and then hit them in behind and hurt them. So, he needs to play that up, doesn't he? And he needs to emphasise to his players that, look, you've shown that you can go and control the game. You've shown that you can go and dominate possession. You just need to be a bit more clinical at one end and a little bit sharper at the other to try and turn it round. Whereas, we're in a much nicer position where we can look at it from the point of view of, we're in the ascendancy. And so we're at home. If we want to make the running of the game, then we can. If we want to let them come at us, we've got that luxury. And so, yeah, I think, as loath as I am to put too much praise on Lampard before, we hopefully smash him out of the playoffs, I do think he spoke about as well as he could have, didn't he? But yeah. I imagine there'll have been some harsh internal conversations between him and his staff, I would have thought, after that first leg, and they'll be itching to come and put it right. So we definitely can't take them lightly.
Suppose as well, when you lose a game of such importance in front of your home fans, there's going to be then an inevitable fallout. Like I've been reading and listening to some of the what some of the Coventry fans have said in the wake of the game, and there's people wanting 3 and 4 changes to their starting 11, and I suppose that makes them unpredictable, doesn't it? Because all of a sudden, you've got the question mark. I saw Haji Wright getting slaughtered, which is mad to me because he's, other than the other night, he's had some really good games against Sunderland this season and scored goals against us. I saw people saying, bringing Ellis Sims, where there's another aspect because he used to play for us and he might not be everyone's favourite down at Coventry. I think so, he's a bit Marmite, like he was at Sunderland, to be fair, a bit Marmite, but he's an option to bring in. He's somebody who has shown he can score goals at this level. I think Mason Clark, who got some minutes off the bench, is a good player, and he's somebody who could potentially come in, and Lampard was actually asked about him, and he basically just kind of said it was good to get him on the pitch because he hasn't played much recently, so he's an option. I've even seen people saying sort of like drop Ben Sheaf, who for me is the best player. But all these conversations, Coventry fans are having these conversations like dropping players and bringing players in, which I think that's problematic in my opinion. This is literally the most important game of the season at this point, unless they get through it. And there's serious conversations going on around who might play. Whereas from a Sunderland side of things, I know we mentioned Mundell before as somebody who could come in, but honestly, I don't see him starting the game. And if we do see him, it's going to be later in the match, probably. So, like, we don't, even though we've got a fully fit squad almost, we don't have those same frustrations and headaches over team selection all of a sudden because we got the good result. So I suppose what I want to ask you about is, is that a good thing or not? Because, yes, it makes us a little bit more predictable. It makes them a little bit less predictable. But I'm just wondering, could you be at danger of resting on your laurels if you just pick the same team and Coventry have already had a chance to work you out? Like, I don't see how kind of transporting the mind of Régis to Bris on this. Like, what do you think he'll actually do?
To be honest, I actually think it's almost all positive for us, really. Because I think if you're Bris, you're looking at it and thinking, look, if I stick with the same team, I know that they're good enough to beat Coventry because they've proven it a few days ago. We know we've got really dangerous forwards in Isidore and Mayenda who will cause them problems, regardless of whoever else lines up. And all of those players, you'd imagine, would be feeling pretty confident after starting the first leg and getting the result. On the flip side, he's got loads of options to change the team if he wants to because we've got so many fit players. We can go back to the 3 in midfield. We can change who plays on the left. We could go with one strike. We could, it's theoretically, if we wanted to, we could go to a back 5 or a back 3. Like
we did at the end of the first leg, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly.
Like got a goal.
We've got loads of options, and I think crucially as well, we've got a lot of different options that we've at least seen in parts of the season at different times, whether it's for full games or just for, periods of games. We're not going into it totally cold either. Whereas I think if you're Lampard, you're looking at it a little bit more and thinking, I don't want to name the same team because they've shown that they couldn't get the job done. If you do make changes, then obviously it's all very last minute. And because of that element of maybe not panic, but certainly concern and worry amongst the fan base where, you don't want to be in a position where you're debating who to drop and who to bring in and stuff, like you say, with days and hours to go till the biggest game of the season thus far. There's always the risk that it just doesn't work, even if it's a really sensible change and you can, you've got loads of logic behind it. Sometimes on the night, players just aren't ready. Now, yes, obviously the caveat is they can spring a surprise and they've always got the potential to do something that we don't quite work out how to stop quickly enough. and it would cause us problems because, I think Bris said it again 4 or 5 times. Coventry are a good team. They're in the playoffs for a good reason. So there's always the risk that they can do something to, put a bit of a spanner in the works for us. But I think I'd have to say, going into the game, I would much rather be in Bris's position than Lampard's, because I think they're a little bit damned if they do, damned if they don't in terms of making changes, whereas we're much more in the position that we can feel confident no matter what team we put out. And yeah, we'll get on to team selections and how we think the game will go and stuff. But, I think I'd be surprised if he named exactly the same team, even if purely because there's only been a few days between games and you might need a bit of freshness in the legs. But if he does, I wouldn't be shocked and I certainly wouldn't be disappointed. So I think it's a nice position to be in.
I suppose the thing is, though, is because we've taken all this time to prepare and get players fit and all the rest of it, you almost expect them to be able to play, get 90 minutes out of all of them. And then, do you know what I mean? Not worry so much about who's going to get through 90 minutes. Like, make your changes be reactive during the game and proactive, rather than think, well, I'm only going to get bloody 70 minutes out of him because he's ran a lot recently and he's knackered. I don't think we've got that problem. We shouldn't have anyways. We should be pretty confident in our own ability to manage the fitness during the game. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be intense and we'll have to make changes. But I think it'll probably be more like what happened in the first leg, where, we'll get, because we were starting to get to a point in the game the other night when it was ones each, where they were just bombarding us with crosses into the box. So the reaction was to put Meckham in there. And I thought that was, for that moment, it was perfect. And then we then go on to score a goal from it, which I don't think I can sort of put that down to the change in personnel. But I would say that sometimes that can be a help and a hindrance. Like, if you put a defender on, it tells you the team, we're just going to defend now, come on to us. But because we did that, they piled forward and it left gaps. And there was obviously a lot of luck involved with that second goal. But at the same time, do you get that much space and a chance to break if you don't have an extra defender on the pitch? It's interesting because we'll never know, but I think there's probably some sort of merit in that conversation. And then, when it comes into this game, given what Bris has said about basically starting from scratch and wanting to win it, I'm not going to be shocked if he picks the same team. However, I think approach will be different. And that's basically what he hinted at, I think. I think if I was going to put money on it, which you can't put money on hypothetical scenarios in games, but I would say that, we're probably going to start pretty quickly and we're going to try and get that second goal early. And if we don't, we'll have a plan for that. And if we do, we'll have a plan for it. I don't know about you. I just got this feeling that there was a very methodical and well thought out structure to everything we saw the other night. Like one of the first things everybody was saying after the game was the tactics were spot on. And I'm almost expecting this to be more of like that, because whilst Coventry are going to make changes in terms of their approach, they are pretty predictable. They've almost got that feel like, you remember the Tony Pulis Stoke team, and it was hard to stop, but at the same time you knew what they were going to do.
Yeah,
there's a bit of that about Coventry, where if they get a throw in, it's going to be a long throw. If they get a chance to cross it into the box, there's going to be bodies on the penalty spot. So it doesn't matter who they change. If they bring in Sims, if they bring in Mason Clark, if they change a central midfielder, you're going to see pretty much that style of play, aren't you? Whereas with us, I just think having unpredictable strikers who can not only get in behind, but also with someone like Mayenda can pick the ball up on the edge of his own box and carry it 80 yards and maybe even score. We are tough to work out. So I'm really excited to see what we do. But I don't know about you, Johnny. What would you do when it comes to selecting the team? Are you thinking same 11? Because I am. For honest, I can't see him changing anything.
I wouldn't, like I say, I wouldn't be shocked at all if it was the same 11, and I wouldn't find anything to really pick holes in. The only reason I think he'd be making changes would either be if he's decided to start Mundle, which, they'll know how fit he is better than we will. Personally, I don't think it's worth the risk at this stage, but, okay. If
imagine it though, Mundle left, Lefebvre through the middle.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, that's it. The massive, massive benefit of that would be getting Lefebvre centrally from minute one. So it might be worth it just for that alone. But barring Mundle being fit enough to start, I'd be shocked if there's anyone changed other than for pure fitness reasons. If somebody pulls up with a bit of a, tight hamstring and Bris thinks maybe not worth the risk, barring that, I wouldn't be surprised to see the same team. But I think you were spot on to point out that whether the team stays the same or changes, it's all in the approach. And I fully agree as well that I expect us to come out firing from minute one. Even if, look, it might not work out, we might.
Sorry to butt in, but it's pointless, isn't it? You know what? Having all this focus on atmosphere and intensity to start the game, and there's going to be a big display before the game, and the light show and the noise and all that, only to then just suck the energy out of the room. We've got to start fast.
Exactly. There's nothing that'll get the crowd on side quicker than creating a chance or having a shot or getting a good crossing in the first couple of minutes. And there's nothing that'll suck the life out of the place quicker than seeing us line up with 4 on the edge of the box and then 4 10 yards in front of them. So we have to, because we're in a lovely position where, look, we don't want to concede a goal and we don't want to give Coventry any route back into the tie, but we can afford to go hard in that first 10, 15, 20 minutes. Because the potential upside is huge. Like you say, if we get an early goal with maybe a packed, full house after the display before the game with, all of the build-up and everything around the match, if we do get an early goal, the roof will absolutely come off the place and it'll just be bouncing from that point on. So it's worth taking a risk for the potential of getting that, I think. Because even if it goes wrong, okay, it could go wrong by us just not scoring. Well, that's always a risk in football. You just don't convert your chances. Or it could go wrong by conceding, We're committing men forward and then we end up getting done on the break ourselves. But even if that happens, we're just back to level pegging. It's not like we're in Coventry's position where, I think as Lampard was alluding to, like, they want to go and just attack. But if they concede the first goal, then all of a sudden you've got to score 2 just to take it to extra time away from home against a team who finished higher than you're in the league. That is a much, much riskier proposition. Whereas I think for us, it's almost a bit of a free hit for that first 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it's important you mentioned the fact it's away for Coventry because their away form's not great.
Yep.
I'm just looking now, they've won 6 all season away from home. So 6 out of 23 is not good. To flip it around, we only won 9, to be fair, but still, we've got the 4th best away form in the league. Theirs is the 12th. So, and that's something we've heard from Coventry fans quite a lot, is that their away form isn't great. So you've almost got it. The thing is, though, right, is that how do you even you can't really draw on any other away occasion for a game like this because it's going to be the most unique atmosphere that either set of players have played in. And Coventry have got to make sure they don't get overawed by it. Like, we didn't get overawed because their atmosphere was fantastic the other day. Whereas I've seen us go into situations like that and we've been okay, but ultimately melted a little bit. Like, I think of that Luton away leg a couple of years ago, where I don't think we weren't up to it. I just think that the Luton fans made it difficult. The players were right on top, the fans were right on top of the pitch. And, I remember balls going out for throw-ins and stuff and Ahmad getting bollocks abuse off them. And, just, I think it depends on the scenario. In playoffs, it's very, very different. But I've seen a lot of Coventry fans quite worried about their away form. It wasn't mentioned in either press conference, but I've still been interested to hear what Lampard had to say about that. Because he's obviously going to brush it off and just say this is a unique game and we've got to win it. We're going to try and win it. But you've got to wonder, is that playing on the minds? Because they have the opportunity to make because they've got better home form than we do across the span of the season. They won 14 home games, we'd won 12. So they really, I think their big chance was to make it count in the home leg, and they've not done that. So now the doubt creeps in, doesn't it? And they've got to come to the stadium has been great this season. We've talked a lot about the atmosphere and the fact that it has been a bit flat at times, but I don't think that's going to be the case for this game. So for us to give ourselves the best possible chance of thriving, we've got to be at it from minute one, and it's got to be front foot football. And we might retreat after 10, 15 minutes, but for that first 10, 15 minutes, we do not let them breathe. We get all over them. And I might just be reading between the lines, but that was sort of the impression I got from listening to Bris. So an interesting matchup. We can't predict Coventry's team because we aren't Coventry fans, but I did allude to a few of the things I've read there. They do have options to change it, and given that there were so many disappointing performances from their perspective, I imagine there'll be at least a handful from Coventry's side. But anyways, down to it, I don't really. I know I listened to Chris say this earlier in the week. He said it's pointless asking for score predictions for games like this, but I'm gonna put you on the spot. How do you see the game playing out?
So I agree that I think that first sort of 15, 20 minutes, I think we will go hard at them. And then obviously it's going to make a huge difference whether we do manage to nick a goal in that period or not. Because I think if we were to get a goal early, it's got the potential for us to then go on and end up, we could put 2 or 3 past them and make it a really comfortable evening. If we don't get something then, and all of a sudden, they'll come back into the game, it'll get a little bit cagier. And I'm sure there'll be doubt and nerves creeping into our players as well. Even though we're ahead in the tie, it is still a slim advantage. It's only 1 goal. Yeah. And, all it takes is, look, again, Coventry are a good team, so they could punish us. But even then, all it takes is a dodgy bounce, a deflection from a shot from 30 yards, takes it past the keeper. Like, any individual one-off moment could result in us losing that lead. So it's a really, really horrible one to call. I expect us... Well, no, expect is the wrong word. I hope we will go through, and I think, I do make us favourites because you've pointed out the away record, and you've pointed out that they'll be hurting after that first leg, and I think we're good enough to take advantage of it, and maybe not put them to the sword, but I think we're good enough to win the game on the night to make sure we win the tie. Because obviously, we could play a draw, and that would send us through, but I think we're good enough to win the game, and I think Bris is going to be wanting us to win the game as well. He's not going to want us to just trust to them not getting a goal. So I'm going to go... This is a long-winded way of getting some thinking time. I'm going to say it's going to be 2-1 to us. So a mirror of the first leg result. I think we're going to get a goal in the first half, and then I think second half we're going to get another, and then they're going to score with maybe, 15, 20 minutes to go, and then it's going to be a really, really lovely, tense, nervous finish for us as we just think, right, let's just hold on. Now it's stupid, yeah? Just keep going. But, yeah, I'm going to say 2-1. I'm going to say it's about time Joe Bellingham got a goal, and I can't look past Big Eli. I think my end is going to get another one as well and set him up really nicely going forward. So, yeah, 2-1 to us. And who cares? He'll score for them. Let's just say the keeper.
I'm a little bit, for somebody who's usually very confident, I'm a little bit less confident about that. I think Sunderland are going to put us through the ringer. I think Coventry are going to get the first goal and we're going to win in extra time. I hope I'm wrong. Nothing goes this smoothly with Sunderland, right?
Yeah.
So whatever happens, by the time we leave that ground, we're going to feel drained. That's what I think. But I do think we'll still get through. I just think it's going to be tough. What I'm hoping for and what I think will happen are 2 very different things. What I'm hoping for is we start quickly, we get an early goal, and we basically just suck the life out of Coventry that way. Like we make it, we give them a cushion that they struggle to get through, and that's it really. But I would much prefer your way. I would much prefer that we get that 2-0 lead, and then if they score, who cares kind of attitude. But we'll see, mate. We'll see. I mean, like we've talked about quite a bit here. The 2 managers both seem fairly relaxed. I would say if I was sort of judging them against each other, Bris seems the happier, more confident, as he should be, because he's the one who's going into this with a lead. But contrary to what a lot of Coventry fans seem to think, Sunderland fans don't think we're already through. We're not convinced of that. I don't think, and as you've just heard by me, I think there's a long way to go in this, and we don't want to get too carried away. So we'll see what happens tonight, mate. But I'm still confident. I'm still very confident. And as I said, if you haven't already heard Chris and Martin talking to Scott Wilson in the preview, make sure you stick that on. If you would rather forget about the game because your nerves are jangling, then we've got some bits to distract you with. We've got the On This Week pod, which came out on Monday morning, and that's a new feature on How We The Podcast that is basically the biggest bunch of Sunderland history nerds you can possibly find, all getting together to chat about old times. And because this is a pivotal week in the history of the club, we talk a lot about playoffs. So it's the anniversary of the playoff victory against Newcastle in 1990. It's the anniversary of the second final semi against Sheffield United, which some say is the greatest atmosphere that's ever been heard at the Stadium of Light. So let's hope we can put that argument to bed tonight and make it even better once again with this one. Also talking about the game against Chelsea in 1963, which was important to Sunderland's promotion chances, and discussing a whole host of players such as Tony Norman, Lionel Perez, Lee Chapman got a mention, Marco Gabbiadini. There was a lot of really good stuff in there. So that will distract you from the reality of the game if you fancy it. And also on Sunday, we did a pod, or at least we released a pod, which was recorded a few years ago now, with the journalist Bill Bradshaw, who's also a Sunderland fan. But most famously, he was the man who uncovered Swindon's financial irregularities in 1990, which led to Sunderland getting promoted. So he is the only journalist, I guess, who's ever got a team promoted by running stories. And that, again, was absolutely fascinating. Even if you weren't around at that time, just listen to it, because to hear from the horse's mouth the story of how he got Sunderland promoted by running a story was fascinating, and it's a good 2 hours or so with the lads on that one. So lots to catch up on this week. I say pretty much at the end of all these pods, we're now a daily pod, but given it's playoff season, we've actually been posting one a day. But hopefully you're enjoying it all. And just to let you know as well, we're not going anywhere over the summer. We've got lots of stuff planned for the summer. So I know people are really enjoying the shows. I know people are enjoying the regularity of them. It's keeping them tapped into Sunderland. We won't go away over the summer. We've got loads we want to do. We've got loads of ideas and interviews and features and stuff. So yes, great time to get subscribed to Howie the Podcast. Fingers crossed, this isn't the last pod before a game between now and the end of the season. We hopefully will have a Wembley trip to talk about, but we'll see. We've got a reaction pod coming up after the game, and then there will be a review tomorrow. So again, even after this match, no matter what happens, we'll be back with a bunch of shows. Thank you, Johnny. Been a pleasure, mate.
Thank you very much. Pleasure was mine, as usual.
Yes, and thank you to the listeners. We'll catch you on the next one, and see you later.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.